Hello, and welcome to the No Wrong Notes podcast, a show hosted by me, Veronica Kokos, holistic voice teacher and singer just like you. Grab a cup of tea, relax, and sit back as we discuss all things singing technique, mindset tips, and more so you can show up as the most confident and creative singer you can be. Hey friends, and welcome to this week's episode where I'll be giving you my spring wellness guide for singers. We are now officially in the spring season in the Northern Hemisphere, even if it's been feeling spring-like for a while for some of us already. It's pretty interesting how spring seems to come earlier and earlier every year, but that's a topic for another time. In this episode, I'll be sharing some things for singers to consider over the next few months as we all move into the new season. I'll be sharing some ideas for embracing the spring season, as well as some things you can do to boost your overall vocal health. So let's get into it. I'll be honest and say that I didn't really grow up with seasons in the traditional sense. Living the first 23 years of my life in the Austin, Texas, Central Texas area, it was basically winter from January to maybe the end of February, and even winter would have a few warm days sprinkled in. By March, you could go swimming over spring break. It was that warm. It wasn't until I moved up to Northern Virginia in 2016 for grad school that I finally got my first taste of experiencing seasons, and boy, the spring season here in the mid-Atlantic really blew me away. Seeing all the flowers bloom and fully getting to experience real, authentic spring was exciting to me, even if spring had a few days of snow here and there. As a result, I've made it a point since moving up here to enjoy all that spring has to offer, and I'd like to share a few of my own seasonal activities and rituals that you can also use to embrace the spring season. The first thing that is obvious when it comes to spring is spring cleaning. This one is especially good for the singers out there trying to maintain good vocal health. By giving your space a good cleaning, you're clearing out dust that can actually affect your respiratory health. If you're concerned about inhaling some of that dust while cleaning, mask up. You don't have to do all your spring cleaning in one go either. Set aside one room or one task, like cleaning and decluttering your pantry, for 1 hour or one day. I personally like putting on some music, an audiobook, or a podcast and getting down to business. So I highly recommend making this activity fun for yourself. Get the vibes right and cleanse your space. Moving on to the next way to embrace the spring season, I enjoy taking what I call an I Spy nature walk, looking for seasonal flowers or native birds to my area. This may sound silly, but being fully present with our surroundings is a great way to center and ground yourself and calm anxiety. This spring, I'm actually planning to visit the botanical gardens in my area, though you can do this anywhere, even in your neighborhood or in the middle of a city. Nature is everywhere, and springtime is a great time to appreciate its beauty. And as I mentioned, when I take this walk, I like to look for seasonal flowers or plants and native birds to my area. There are actually apps out there where you can identify different plants. So if you're very curious as to what flower is this? What plant is this? There are apps out there where you can send a photograph of whatever it is that you see. You basically take a photo, upload it to the app, and it identifies the plant for you. I forget what it's called actually, but I'm sure if you go in the app store and, search for plant identifier or plant ID, you can usually find those apps. There's also a app for identifying bird calls. So if you, and this is really getting nerdy, you guys, but I know some of you guys, knowing, what kind of birds you're hearing, it can really enhance things for you. It can enhance your experience of the outdoors. So if you're interested in all of these little nerdy things, there's actually an app. I think it's developed by Cornell University that actually identifies different bird calls. So if you download the app, again, I forget what this one is called, but I'm sure if you look up, bird call identifier or bird call ID, it's, like I said, developed by Cornell University. And basically you open the app and you record the bird call, or you could literally just turn it on and record whatever it is that you're hearing, and it'll identify what bird it is that you're hearing. So I don't know, this is just for the nature nerds out there, but to me it kind of enhances my experience of things in that I'm like, oh wow, okay, that's a mourning dove call. I don't know, it's kind of fun. Moving on, one more thing that you can do to embrace the spring season is to make meals with seasonal ingredients. I talked about the use of seasonal ingredients in the winter wellness episode, but making meals that use seasonal ingredients is not only great for getting a variety of minerals and nutrients, which is great for singers' overall health, but is often more sustainable. Some fruits and vegetables that are in season in the springtime, according to the USDA, are asparagus, avocado, broccoli, collard greens, pineapples, strawberries, and spinach. Now, let's talk about some of the things that singers specifically can do to boost their overall vocal health. Obviously, spring is the season for allergies, especially with all the pollen around. The first thing I'll recommend for all of you singers who suffer from allergies like me is to check out some herbal teas and tinctures. There is no substitute for allergy meds, and I highly recommend using meds if you need to. I use them. But as someone who gets very dried out vocally by allergy meds at times, I will use herbal remedies first, then I'll turn to, medications like Claritin. Some of the herbs that are useful for allergies are nettle, ginger, and yarrow. Personally, I actually just went out in my backyard yesterday and I foraged some, it's called purple nettle. I believe that's the formal name for it. But I just plucked some nettle over the weekend and I dried out the leaves and I'm going to use that in a tea. But you don't have to go that far if you're really not into foraging or if it's not your thing. At most grocery stores, they have nettle tea, they have ginger tea in the tea aisle. So highly recommend checking out those herbs. I also like using mullein herb for respiratory support year round. And like I said, I personally keep nettle and ginger tea on hand and drink nettle tea daily in the early spring. You can also find tinctures for these herbs in a more concentrated form that you can then sprinkle in your water at Whole Foods and other health food stores. Of course, with any herb, supplement, or any medicine for that matter, you'll want to do your research before consuming to see if any of the herbs mentioned interact with medications, as well as any side effect warnings. Now, the next thing I'll recommend for singers is sinus rinsing. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the winter wellness episode, but using a saline nasal spray is amazing for allergy sufferers. Of course, you can use the good old-fashioned neti pot, but personally I hate the neti pot and prefer to use an upright saline spray bottle. You can find saline spray at Target, Walmart, any drugstore. They're usually next to the allergy medicine or other nasal sprays. Sinus rinsing is great for keeping your nasal passages moisturized and clearing your nasal passages of allergens. I do this daily and it honestly helps me breathe better as someone who, has deviated septum stuff going on. So that's another big reason why I do it. I highly recommend. As a bonus to this tip, I recommend sleeping with a humidifier on. I know I mentioned this in the winter wellness episode, but this also helps with keeping the nasal passages moisturized. And personally, I sleep better with it on. The third thing I'll mention is to consume local honey. Local honey contains local pollen, and consuming local honey is thought to help boost one's tolerance for pollen and seasonal allergies. I always have fermented garlic honey on hand, which is literally just garlic cloves that I put in a ball jar, and I cover those garlic cloves with local honey. And then I store that honey, that garlic honey, for at least a month before using. And I recommend Googling fermented garlic honey if you want to learn how to do this yourself. It's super simple. You just have to flip, aka burp, the honey daily for like a couple of weeks. So that way the garlic and the honey are kind of fully fermented, I guess is the word. I've also started putting honey in my coffee with oat milk, which is actually really delicious. Honey is a natural sweetener and it's a good substitute for creamer. Plus you get the added bonus of that local honey. All right. Those are all of my tips for embracing the spring season and taking care of yourself vocally. To recap, I mentioned spring cleaning, nature walks, eating seasonally, herbal remedies, sinus rinsing, and local honey. If y'all have your own vocal health practices or springtime rituals, I would love to hear them. Just shoot them over to me on Instagram. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on your platform of choice. If you want to work with me this spring, one of the best ways to do that is through my Curious Singer membership. You can find out details for that in the show description. And if you want more singing tips in the meantime, be sure to check out my social media channels on Instagram and TikTok. All right, that is it for this time. And in the meantime, happy singing, y'all.